Hey guys, Bruce from Printavo. Welcome back to the podcast. Got a really special episode that we're going to jump into in just a little bit with some early people over at TeeSpring. I'm sure you guys have heard of them as they've really rebounded recently, more in the influencer world. But anyway, we're going to get into that, their journey, their ups, their downs. It was a really cool story. But first, we've got Mr. Matt Marcotte and Stephen Farrig over at Campus Inc. We were hanging out. Matt, you were just over at a Cornette workshop a week ago? I saw on Instagram.
Yeah, just about a week ago. It was something that, honestly, it came into my inbox. Just, hey, Cornette's going to be in town. They want to talk about some of their equipment, and it's going to be at Gibson Steakhouse. And I was like, I don't know a whole lot about Cornette, to be honest. I would like to know more. They're a big player in the digital space, direct-to-garment, a whole bunch of stuff. And I like steak. I mean, so it was kind of a win-win. I went out to the event, ran into some friends that run some shops that I had been working with throughout the years, and learned a whole bunch about their direct-to-garment presses, as well as their entire mini factory cut and sew units that they have, where it's direct from point of sale, e-commerce, straight through to actually digitally printing onto all sorts of different substrates, and then CAD cutting, and just dropping out of a machine where people can start to sew one-offs live time pretty much. So seeing everything from that, as well as their production flow software. So again, the software they've got that goes straight, plugs into your Shopify store or wherever you're hosting, right? And it can go straight through the entire process, straight to your direct-to-garment machine, all the way through shipping. It's really interesting seeing how some of these large-scale production facilities that are doing direct fulfillment like that, what their options are out there in the marketplace. And I hadn't quite really dove into that Cornette world yet. So it was really interesting to see and learn more about it. So, I mean, yeah, an opportunity for some free education and a really good steak. You know you're going to find me there.
So where was Jeff Bezos? Was he at the dinner or?
Yeah. He was actually sitting behind me. He was really annoyed to look around my big head.
Gotcha.
But I mean, they put the important people in front, right? So,
yeah.
No, but I mean, that was something that is definitely of interest too. Amazon does own a large portion of that company now. And from my understanding, a lot of it was because of that software process of actually keeping track of all the jobs in queue and that entire flow. So definitely something of value to look at. And as we start to really see the e-commerce, I mean, it's already happened, right? 2020, the e-commerce shift, something like 66% of all garments sold in the world were sold online. So starting to see a lot more of that.
Jeff Bezos, if you're listening to this, if you're in outer space, if you're not yet, and you're trying to kill some time, you can buy my company. I'll sell Printavo to you too. Amazon, come on in. Just I'll retire now. I'm good.
I'll have to do some research because I remember looking at that Amazon note. I remember people talking about that, but I thought it was like 3% or 4%, not a huge piece, but pretty significant. Is Cornette is I'd have to look at their market cap, but
yeah, they're a publicly traded company now, I think, right?
$5.5 billion company, yeah. So
yeah, and I think you're right. It's somewhere between 3 and 5% is what Amazon owns, but. I mean, Amazon buying any amount of your company tends to mean something is of value there, right? So,
sure.
Interesting to see where that goes in that space. But yeah, it was super interesting seeing what they can do. I mean, it's no mystery that I'm a screen print purist, right? Nothing, in my opinion, will beat a screen print. But where I've seen the evolution of direct-to-garment happen just in the last 2 years alone, right? Now that they can have one unit that can actually DTG on all substrates, right? You can go over poly, you can go over cotton. Before it was nope, it's one or the other. Seeing what they can now do as they continue to evolve and more money and time gets put into chemistry and process and the T-shirts, all that stuff. It's really interesting watching its evolution, and it's starting to hit that apex point where it gets faster and faster, right? So definitely something that I wanted to check out, and I'm glad that I did.
Yeah, I mean, it flows right in line with everything lean. I just finished that 2-second lean book, which was really good. But the reduction of inventory, the reduction of time, the reduction of pre-created supplies, just more just-in-time manufacturing. It 100% aligns with that. Obviously, there's still that investment and time aspect. Where does digital play a part in your shop, Stephen?
You know, we're not a shop that I think is ready for like digital squeegee. We don't do a ton of sim process. We don't have huge sim process runs. Um, we do a lot of DTG, and I would almost call it like the printful model. Um, we're trying to call it like decorate on demand, not necessarily like print on demand, because we heavily use like supercolor transfers for a lot of our e-commerce, where we'll order, 30 or 40 transfers. We'll have them on the shelf. Order comes in from Shopify. Next day, we will, heat transfer or order from SNS and heat transfer and get it out. I think there's going to be a spot for it at some point, but I don't know if we're there quite yet. But and people have asked, are you going to buy a whatever is it DTF machine or something like? Now, Supercolor's great, but we're doing a lot more decoration on demand is the best way to put it. So it's coming. That's where the internet is going.
That makes sense. You actually brought up something around people can't wait for their stores to close for you to fulfill stuff anymore, which is funny saying that because it was really only probably a 8-week or I'm sorry, 8-month or 12-month cycle where that changed. So does that mean that it is a lot more transfers or is it stocking stuff if somebody, is going to pump volume?
I think it's, part of our industry is that we don't carry inventory, right? As a screen printer, you get an order, you order the merch, you print it, you ship it out. Not a lot of spoilage, not a lot of waste. That is a pretty lean process in itself, right? Compared to like in the book, a cabinet manufacturer that has to keep like wood on their shelves or stain or things like that. Really, the only things we have to keep on our shelf is ink and kind of the consumables that we buy. So I think it's all about, can you speed up the custom process, right? So if someone places a bulk order today, how quickly can I get it in my shop and printed and out the door? And that means we have to be better with SNS. That means that's why we use GraphX, because our SEPs are done in hours, no longer days. And that's why we're focusing on, direct to screen so we can register quickly. So I don't know if digital is going to hit at some point in there, but I think our industry is already trying to crunch it a little bit, and we're just going to have to do it more, because people can't wait. We do close down merch stores. We will do a couple runs of merch stores now if we see that a store is going off and doing really well. But with our Shopify stores, people expect us to be Amazon. I don't know, Matt, when you guys do Sound and Fury stuff, like people want to know where their stuff's at, right?
People want it quick. I mean, Sound and Fury, it's definitely a little bit easier because it's a small company, a smaller brand, and we can kind of control that entire process. But when I was running production at Second City and seeing a master like Stevie who's running this giant fulfillment and e-commerce solution, it was very different, right? It all depends on what the customer expects and what the customer is willing to pay for. So there was different options all the way through. Look, when orders come through, every couple of weeks we'll fulfill. Straight through, when an order comes through, we'll fulfill it the same day. So one's going to require printed inventory that we have to constantly, as we hit minimums, fulfill and print and then stock again. But I mean, when I was running there, he had 2 buildings. One building was just production. One building was just full of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of finished goods, right? And then you've got massive teams just picking and packing. Seeing things like digital squeegee, seeing things like more advanced direct-to-garment. You had mentioned supercolor and direct-to-film, things like that, transfers. I think we're already starting to see more of the customer base. So the person whose store you're hosting, right, or whose merch you're hosting, they're starting to see the benefit of the immediate and knowing they've got a shorter window in which to capture that audience. And I think we're going to see people willing to maybe be a little more lenient with how much money they're willing to pay for that premium. I mean, we joke about Jeff Bezos, right? But the Amazon service. I think people are going to say, look, if you can fulfill it right away, but that means it costs me X amount more, fine, right? And I think that also goes into how you need to determine how you're selling that service and what that expectation really is. Because one, you have to have space, you have to have inventory, you have to have more employees to fulfill. So you have to make sure that you're capturing for that on the charge. But again, being transparent about where on that spectrum do you want to be with the fulfillment.
Speed is going to drive it. I mean, anything that is continually faster to the customer and makes them feel good is just going to drive where the market continues to go. I mean, when you get an email that you ordered something and then that it's been fulfilled 2 hours after or something, like, it feels good. And companies aren't stupid. They want to make customers feel good. They want them to get their stuff and keep moving. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about. It's cool, though, that you got to go to that. I didn't get an invite. Steven didn't get an invite. Producer Chris didn't get an invite. So
It was just me and Jeff Bezos. They only invited the ones that mattered.
thanks, Jeff. Okay, I got a question for you guys. Business-wise, personally, too, what would you say is an activity that you've done or created in COVID that you're going to stick to going forward? Farrag, you're up.
Oh boy. An activity that I started during COVID that I'm going to keep up. Is this a business process or is this a personal thing?
Let's do both.
Oh boy. We are much more virtual, but we're actually a lot more efficient with our customers because any qualified customer is hopping on a Zoom call with us. They don't have to come into our shop, and we're able to get on a Zoom, share screens, pull up their Adobe files. We were with a client yesterday, 1,000 miles away, and we had their design team, Illustrator was open, our team, and we nailed a whole order in an hour. I don't think that's going away, and it's actually making us better at sales because we're much more efficient that way instead of so much back and forth email. It drives me nuts. So a lot of Zooms and a lot of Looms. So the other part of that is I send a ton of Loom videos. I have it saved on my computer. If I need to edit something, quickly record a Loom and I publish it out. So Zooms and Looms, and I'm using Looms a lot for standardizing the business and just sending them to people in the company. And I kind of have my own library. So that is not going away. So those are my two. Matt, what do you got?
So for me, it's a Printavo one, so it should make Bruce happy. But with the automations that came out a couple months back, having the ability to apply tasks, that's honestly been a game changer for how we run Sound and Fury. Obviously, I'm not at Sound and Fury that often, but I do have work that I have to do to help out anything higher end SEPs, process stuff, anything like that. And before it was always, back and forth emails, back and forth messages, and after my work day, I'd get to it and knock out what I could. Now, being able to trigger automations that just apply tasks to me makes it so much easier for me to knock something out over lunch, knock something out after work, and just get things, and then triggers right back to Mike. So we're actually, for being a smaller shop with only a few people, we're, again, way more effective and efficient with less communication. And that communication, although it's nice, it oftentimes went other ways too, and it'd end up taking longer in the day. He wasn't getting things done, I wasn't getting things done. We were having a talk about one thing that led to 6 other things that really weren't pertinent. So the ability to auto-apply those tasks and just kind of live in a task list has definitely sharpened what Sound and Fury is able to produce and get done day to day. And we're seeing it. I mean, this is the busiest year that the shop's had, which is also great to kind of track that progress along as we go. So using the automations and the task list has been a big thing that I'm going to lean in heavier and heavier on. And the more robust those continue to grow out as the automations continue to improve as we iterate, the more I think I'm gonna utilize those. So
Matt, when are you going direct to screen?
As soon as Campus Inc. Sponsors me and purchases one, that's right then, or Jeff Bezos again. So
2-day screens.
Yeah, then you won't have to buy it. That's funny. What about personal one though?
Definitely getting away from the shop on certain days and working from home. I'm seeing that I'm getting a lot more work done, a little bit more balance, and I don't feel like I'm working super late into the night because I'm able to get away from the shop. Also doesn't let me go crazy trying to have OCD everywhere and like Hurricane Steven. Gives autonomy to my employees, sets the expectation that I'm not going to be there 5 days a week, and that's totally okay. So that's a personal one.
I think mine's actually think I'm the
What?
opposite. I think I need to spend less time working from home because you get a little cabin fevery. So I think I actually need to get out one day a week at least, maybe go work from Sound and Fury or something, just to get away, or just need to like do something with these white walls at my house and just not be in a cell of
Not
madness,
so,
which is what it
You
looks
get you a
like.
sticker.
just one sticker.
Yeah, just one in the corner. I think the leanness financially, the leanness that COVID created was really beneficial to say, what do we actually need and what can we just cut out? Because we went through, and I'm sure everybody did the same. It's just like highlight, delete, unsubscribe, whatever.
Except
and
for
that was
Tavo.
pretty. Yes, that's right. Except for big star there, disclaimer. No, but like, just going through and like, are we sure we need this? Like, can we just be, more thoughtful about this? Do we, it's helpful. It's very easy just to slap on stuff, $5 a month, $10 a month, buy that. That's $300. Okay, cool. Like it just helps, move forward. I think in a period of growth, you constantly do that, but every small business, I think we just have to be really particular about that spend and just make sure to be just as smart as we were when we were smaller, but smart too, right? You don't want to pinch pennies to save a dollar. So anyway, I think that's our work one. I'd say personally,
Settled on a podcast mic, Bruce? How many did you go through?
this is the third. I would say, personally, I actually really liked not traveling that much. But unfortunately, that's not the case out of COVID. It was nice being more home. Like I'm sure you like are similar working from home versus the shop. You can be, with your wife more, you can hang out. You don't have to be gone as much. But that's definitely changed. I would say, I think I personally learned how to better deal with larger situations at hand. So, we had the business that was happening. Everybody didn't know what was going to happen to their lives, let alone their business over the next 2 months, right? So that was a huge unknown. Then you also had everything election wise, which, if you've got a family that's split between beliefs or whatever, it's almost like a religion. People are so oil and water about it. And so that's happening. Then there's a lot of like race relations and everything that's happening. And coming from like a very diverse household, that was just like a lot. And so that created just I feel like getting really good at departmentalizing things better or mentally dealing and working through more difficult situations better. That I think makes you a lot tougher for future circumstances. And that, this isn't that big of a deal. It's what people kind of go into. It's just t-shirts and then, okay, let's figure it out and move on. But
yeah, in comparison to everything else that's going on, I mean, literally you just listed a pandemic, race relations, the political atmosphere, like all those are some heavy things all happening at once. So compartmentalizing and looking at your day-to-day and being able to just take a deep breath and do what you can, I think is a very important mental achievement that everyone needs to be able to go. Because if you look at the overarching madness going on day to day and you just tune into the news and it's terrifying, right? So I think that's a really good, valuable point for everybody. Just take a deep breath and focus on what you can do and don't stress about everything because it's there to stress you out if you focus on it.
There was also a good analogy, and I think this was in the traction book, where it's if you have like a glass of anything, and the glass represents your day, and the beginning of the day we tend to fill it up immediately with like pebbles and little things. It could be email, it could be like little phone calls, text messages, this stuff, and it's kind of like a third of the way full. And then we go through meetings and stuff, and then it's like 2/3 full. And then we try to do the big stuff that's really important, and those are like the big rocks that you try to put in, but there's no more room in the glass at the end of the day. And so I think switching that is the other thing that I'm realizing is just start it every day trying to do the biggest, most impactful stuff to fill up that glass, and then fill it up with the little things that we kind of get like so focused on checking off little tasks because it feels good, but it just doesn't move the needle a lot of times on some of the smaller stuff. So yeah, there's that. week. Okay, jumping into Ask Anything. We've got a good question. Actually, 2 questions. I'm going to roll into one because they're very similar. You guys can always email us, podcast@printavo.com, with your question, your business problem, your personal problem. We'll mark it as anonymous if you want. Anything to be able to get the group thinking on. We could do the research on, whatever you'd like. But this comes of a question around equipment and financing, and also used versus new equipment. So the first question was, I'm going to buy a new piece of equipment. They're looking at the Rock A10. What is the best company to finance through? The second question they're getting into is a little bit more like, what are the qualifications to get financed? And then, if possible, should I look for more used presses or doing privately? I know you guys, obviously, Matt, you've got experience on the sales end. Farrag, you've got experience buying new equipment, used equipment, all of that stuff. So I thought this was a good one.
You should be able to, you shouldn't, credit is a scary thing for a small business owner, and you should know how to use it very well. There's a book that I read called I'll Teach You to Be Rich, and it goes through the fundamentals of credit. And if it's hard to get credit, then it might mean that you're not ready to buy something big. That's a very good warning sign. That being said, that piece of equipment is an employee in your business, and you can't really just return it or fire it. So you have to have a 3-year plan of exactly how you're going to pay for it. And you can't bet on getting the sales. You should already have the sales and be able to pay for it. So if you're getting that rock and it's going to be $1,000 a month, and there's 48 payments there or 64 payments or whatever that may be, you need to make sure that's part of your rent every single month if you choose to finance it. When I first started out in business, my business partners did not let us take any loans out when we bought equipment. We had to buy it in cash. And that was a very blue collar, like, we're going to buy in cash, we're going to save our money, and we're only going to buy what we can afford. Going back, if you know how to use leverage and your assets right, probably would have done it a little bit differently. But when I bought our entire shop from Matt, who sold it to us, which was brand new press, Sprint 3000 split, I think we got the exposure unit. We paid for it in cash, and I don't have any debt there. So I would always tread lightly when you're taking out a loan. There are those people like Geneva Capital and all those other ones out there that will sell. You could go to your bank as well and see what interest rate should be. If it's crazy, you probably shouldn't take the loan, and you should contract out the work until you can afford it. That's my 2 cents.
You worked with your credit union, didn't you? Or
me?
Yeah, when you worked with that, or no?
Or
was it local bank?
You can ask your local bank. Yeah, you can still your bank. That being said, used equipment is on the rise. There's nothing wrong. Our second auto we bought used and had the techs from M&R come in, rebuild it, and it was beautiful. Probably saved $30,000 or $40,000 by buying it used. And if you know your techs and you're buying something 4 or 5 years old, definitely a great idea if you're getting into new equipment and you haven't got your first auto yet.
How'd you find it?
Facebook groups, right? Or Dave McLean's great, and those guys. But I sold our Lawson Trooper to another shop, and it was their dream, right? So, you don't have to start with a Rolls Royce. You can start small, and Matt can talk about that.
Yeah, no, I think you said it pretty eloquently there. There are places you can go for funding. You mentioned Geneva Capital. They're awesome. Troy's a great guy. There's also Beacon Funding. There's lots of different places you can go out to. Jeff Mansfield of Beacon Funding, great guy too. So there's options out there, and they'll work with you to help make it the best that it can be for you, if you need to go that route. But I would definitely take Steven's advice on if you're having a hard time getting credit, that probably means you shouldn't use it yet. So maybe outsource, utilize a shop like Campus or somebody else that's local that can take on that larger work for you, and you can build up your credit. You can build up that cash reserve, profit first mentality. So you can put money aside on its own. Once the money's there, then you can utilize that. Buying used, like Steven said too, it's definitely on the come up. A lot of shops, unfortunately, didn't make it through COVID. So there's a lot of equipment out there. I think, like he said too, if it's within like 4 or 5 years old, and you've got trusted techs, either you can get a hold of M&R or Rock and talk to their techs, or if you've got somebody, I got a buddy Wally who's phenomenal. He's helped Steven out a bunch too.
Wally's amazing.
People like that can help rebuild and get it up to snuff. That's absolutely great. If you're looking older than that, I'd be very, very cautious unless you're already pretty well versed in that machine. I wouldn't recommend someone looking to buy a 15-year-old or even a 10-year-old Sportsman from M&R unless they already had an M&R Sportsman and like know the ins and outs of it and know how to like make the press do what it needs to do and do Band-Aids through the day, because older presses are going to have some finicky issues. Dryers, they're not going to be a fan that I'm saying this, but I'll tell anybody, feel free to buy a used dryer if it's 15, 20 years old. Realistically, the older they are, the less they're going to hold heat internally, so it might cost you more to run. But a dryer is basically an oven, just longer. It's a pizza oven, right? It's got to be able to get a flame. It's got to be able to hold heat. It's got to be able to push that heat around. That's really it. The older ones just
and there's
tend
simple
to
properties
cost more.
of it. Yeah.
Exactly. So honestly, a dryer, if you can find a good one, at least one that's clean on the marketplace and it's going to fit your needs, I'll tell somebody all day long, buy that used and save for a new auto if you can buy that new. Just because, think about it too, if you buy a new automatic, you're going to get the warranty, right? You're going to have like, oh, if something goes wrong, someone's going to help. Somebody else is responsible and liable for me having success with this in this first year. If you buy it used, you get it, it's delivered, somebody installs it, it kind of falls apart. Like, well, you bought it used, it's already run through the motions too much, right? I'll get to it, I can get to it. And you're going to be kind of held up a little bit. So I always recommend, if you can, look at the peripherals, flash units, those are fine to be used. Dryers can be fine to be used, exposure units. Try to do those things used if you can, and then if possible, try to go new with the automatic. But again, if you're looking only a few years old, you can definitely find some great things. If you go with somebody trusted like Dave McLean or one of those folks, those are also going to be valuable too. But just be careful buying it from some small shop down in wherever, unless you've got somebody that can go take a look at it and make sure it's worth the time and the money. Because don't forget, a used automatic, there's the price of the used automatic. Then there's the price of install. There's the price of electric to make sure it's run. You have to make sure you have the right phasing for the electric. There's a lot of other costs that people forget about that go into that. It's like, oh, I bought a used press. It was only $12,000. And then by the time they get it to their shop, installed and everything, like, oh, it ended up being $25,000. And at that point, would it have been more beneficial just to spend $32 and get a smaller brand new one, right? So just make sure you're looking at everything and don't get stuck in just one scope on that. Look at the big picture of install and running that and make sure it's going to be efficient and that the ROI is also there.
If you're going digital, whether it's direct to screen or DTG, buy new. Printheads, but
Yep.
If you're going digital, buy new.
Guys, really excited about this next episode. Alex Phelan from Printforia. He also rode the wave of TeeSpring before, and all the things that happen behind the scenes. There is a lot. Thanks for listening. Here we go. Hey, Print Hustlers, welcome back to another episode of Printavo Print Hustlers Podcast. I'm your host, Bruce from Printavo. Very, very special guest with us today, Alex Phelan out of Printforia. You probably haven't heard of Printforia, and you really can't Google much about Printforia. I've tried. But you're on the Washington, Oregon border there doing some really cool stuff. I'm just really excited to talk. Your LinkedIn is stacked. A lot of history, but your history is from the tech high growth garment side. And we don't hear enough about that because I feel like it's sort of separated. It's like if you're kind of West Coast VC end or you're more general small medium-sized business that it isn't really concerned with venture capital. It's just I'm running an awesome business here. So anyway, there's a lot to unpack here. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Okay, I want to hop right in because having gotten into the screen printing era around 2009, 2010, TeeSpring was booming. TeeSpring was not that they're not, and I'm sure people listening, we're really here's what we're doing, but that was the talk. There also was there was one out of Chicago that was Threadless. Threadless was also booming. Obviously, things have changed. What went down? What was your role? I want to hear it all from start to finish. There's a lot
Sure.
there.
Yeah. So the overarching theme, I'd say for my whole career in this space, and the theme that I think we're going to really touch on today is e-commerce driving decorated apparel, and just e-commerce trends. How it's affecting the overall landscape. So when I started, I did not come from decorated apparel or digital graphics or screen printing, embroidery, anything related to the space. I came from the supply chain, logistics, transportation industry, a little bit of e-commerce fulfillment, e-commerce operations. And one of my friends from St. Louis started this company, TeeSpring, when he was in college. And they wanted to memorialize a bar that got shut down by the cops, and with a T-shirt,
Hmm.
to basically, rally the troops and get the place open again.
Right.
So they went to go talk to screen printers and realized that there's a pretty high barrier to entry just in acquiring decorated apparel. Not only do you have to pay for it up front, but you also have to understand, what the differences are in blank garments. You have to understand a little bit about digital graphics and logos and how color is going to translate to physical products, and it can be a bit intimidating if you're a college kid that doesn't have a lot of money. So they decided to build kind of like a Kickstarter app that would collect pre-orders for this t-shirt design, and so that would at least solve the complexity of understanding how many they needed to order. They were collecting credit card information so that they could pre-charge the credit cards so that they would have the money to pay for the garments up front. And they set a minimum of 100 shirts so that they could satisfy the batch minimum requirements with the screen printer. And so, they ended up selling way more than the minimum. And then that process, sort of repeated for a few different t-shirt campaigns. And so when I joined, my friend
You guys
Walker.
were I feel like one of the, not, there's people doing fundraisers for a long time, but I mean, one to really blow it up though.
Yep, yep. So the whole premise was kind of t-shirt fundraising, or almost like Kickstarter for t-shirts. And Teespring was not the first decorated apparel e-commerce platform. Obviously, there was Custom Ink, Cafe Press, Threadless, but the model of those platforms was fundamentally different than kind of raising money around a campaign of t-shirts, and that sort
Hmm.
of later evolved into print on demand. I'll get there in a second, but basically we when we started, we thought it was going to be a really good platform for charities to monetize their social assets. And we had we were
And
going
wait,
through.
when'd you join?
So I joined in 2012.
Okay.
The company started, I think the company started in late 2011, literally in a dorm room. And when I joined, my friend Walker was telling me, he was back in St. Louis on break from school, and he was telling me about this company that he started, and he was really getting inundated with t-shirt orders that he could not fulfill. And so at the time, I'm a supply chain logistics guy. I'm thinking, t-shirts going into a poly mailer with a shipping label on it, like, doesn't sound that complicated to me.
Sure.
And the
And
part
you
that I
joined
meant,
I'm just referencing your LinkedIn as a production
yeah,
manager too.
I was kind of like the ops person to figure out, how are we going to make this work? I mean, we had, a screen print shop, a local screen print shop in New England. We had a resource for converting art, to something that could be usable by a screen printer, not color separations, but we did, vectorization and stuff like that. And it was literally kind of bootstrapped together with a few manual resources and email. And so at the time, when I was talking to Walker about this, I thought, wow, this doesn't sound that complicated to me. But the part that I missed was the decorating part, right? Obviously,
Hmm.
screen printing, and I had learned a little bit about silk screening, in high school arts and crafts, but that was about it. And so when I dug in and I started trying to understand what does this process look like in a just-in-time or even faster on-demand process, is it even possible to do this with kind of an Amazon Prime like expectation of delivery? And that's when I realized, okay, this is a fairly complex problem. The other thing I realized was that, the traditional industry of decorating garments, whether that's putting ink on them with screen printing or making garments, constructing garments and dyeing them and finishing them, like all of these processes typically take a very long time, and the lead time expectation in the traditional decorated apparel world is very long. We were essentially trying to recreate as close to an Amazon Prime-like experience as possible once the order had been sent to the screen printer. So when I came on, TeeSpring had just kind of evolved from being, in a dorm room to getting some seed funding. We were in a small office in downtown Providence, Rhode Island. I joined right when we figured out kind of our product market fit. So initially, it was right at the time when Facebook, I don't know if you remember, if you were on Facebook, pre 2012, there was this concept of like Facebook pages that had lots and lots and lots of likes, and there was no control mechanisms to prevent people from page owners from sending information to all the people that liked the page. This is pre-Facebook ads. Like Facebook advertising was not even around. Facebook didn't even know how they were going to monetize all of their viewers and everything. So it was really kind of the Wild West. We realized that a lot of these big Facebook pages had very engaged audiences, and a lot of them were around very specific things. I mean, some of them as generic as, I love my dog, but then you get a little bit more specific with I love my poodle, or I love my Rottweiler, or I love my, teacup Yorkie or whatever. And all of a sudden you realize you have, pages for all of these sort of engaged groups that have a lot of followers. And so, we started creating designs for these pages. We had a graphic designer from RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, which is like the best design school in the country. We had an intern from RISD who was creating beautiful graphic designs for every type of big engaged Facebook group you could think of. I mean, we had, political
and just
affiliation.
messaging the admin.
Yeah, so we'd set up the whole thing for them, like the design, everything, the web page,
the store, everything.
Not even a store, just a page of a shirt with a piece of artwork on it, and then a buy it now button, right? So we were like, hey, here's a product that you can put in, that you can show your fans, and the base price is $10, and you're going to sell it for $20, and we're going to give you $10 per unit. And most people thought it was like a scam or something like that. But the very first couple pages that took the bait, they sold 1,000 shirts within 2 days, and
Wow.
made, $10,000 basically doing nothing. So we went from this very sort of frustrating.
But you had the platform, like we'll call it platform, found the customer, but had to make the customer make money. You're 2 levels deep.
Yeah, so exactly right. So we had to find people.
Which that's hard. I mean, we tell shops now, especially if they're getting into stores, like you got to work with a customer that has a presence.
Exactly.
Unless you want to market for them, which at this time there's like this like kind of universe opening with Facebook just allowing you to message millions of people at a time.
Totally. And at the time, this type of platform would have been much less successful without Facebook at that time. I mean, had we continued down the path of nonprofits, it might have been successful at some point, but it took a lot more. It was a lot more resource intensive trying to make those accounts successful. It was really the first kind of iteration of what you could call it, print on demand or social commerce, or, leveraging social media to sell products in a very different, using targeting and ads and things like that, digital ads to convert sales in a very different way than traditional retail works. And so the first, influencers or marketers that we found were just people that had big Facebook pages. And typically these people were really engaged with their fans. They were really excited about the thing that that they had a page about. And
There was actually a company, I don't know if you've heard of them, but called Thread Me Up in Chicago for a while, doing kind of similar,
I
but
think I
they
did hear about
more
them.
not really customer facing, more of like a B2B tool to help. So they would
Yep.
go with people who knew Facebook ads just really well. So any modern event that was happening, positive, negative, whatever it was, would spin up a design, really promote it out, know how to market it, and then send all the orders to Thread Me Up. Thread Me Up would work with the shop and then help fulfill it back out. But
Well, that was kind of the next phase, right? Was the whole internet marketer Facebook ads, because like Facebook pages pre-ads, you just had these big groups, and then there was nothing preventing all of their audience from seeing whatever you were posting. The next kind of iteration of that was when Facebook ads came out, and now you can target all of these people based on all of this granular data that's highly accurate. It's the most accurate sales data that's because it's self-reported. People are willingly sharing all this information about themselves. With Facebook ads, you could create an ad campaign and you could target, for example, let's say I wanted to create a shirt for nurses who really like ice fishing, right? Ice fishing, people who are really into it are really into it. Nurses are typically really, any sort of trade profession, they're typically really proud of their trade and things. So if you can combine those two in a unique way, well, Facebook ads created this, conduit for people to say, okay, I want to target, women who are nurses, who live in the northern Midwest, who are also part of these ice fishing groups, and then all of a sudden maybe you're down to 615 of these people. But if you have a clever enough t-shirt design that's high quality enough and the perception is that it's a high quality product, then maybe you convert 10% of those people and you sell 61 shirts, and all of a sudden you've just made, maybe $600 to $700. So that was the real magic of discovering this social commerce. The challenge that I think everybody faced quickly was, so number one, you had a lot of kind of Me Too copycat platforms popping up.
sure.
That all
Well,
had
and who was doing the spend of was it TeeSpring actually creating the designs and putting it out too? Is it working with people?
That's a
who
great
did
question.
that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Teespring was not doing that. So Teespring was the platform, and it was fueled by sellers. And
Got
the
it.
first
Okay.
the first sellers were Facebook page owners primarily. Now,
Sure.
there was, you'd certainly get a family reunion or some small little order there, but primarily Facebook page owners. The second big wave of sellers were internet marketers that were creating ad campaigns on Facebook
Got
to
it.
try to sell products to certain niches. And you see a lot of this in drop shipping or selling digital ads, cost per action programs, that kind of stuff. That's the community that kind of discovered this, and they said, hey, this is a physical product that everybody loves. It's universal. It's the universal form of expression, and it's just a blank canvas for promoting some idea or expressing yourself somehow.
Got
And
it. So
so,
you guys found those people and then just really started to scale. Looks like raised some 50, $60 million
yep.
and just
And
really pushing forward.
they found us. It was so viral, because as soon as you have some, like Teespring in I can't remember if it was 2014 or 2015, created like 25 millionaires. Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. Like there was like the top 25 sellers on the platform netted over $1 million. I mean, there was some crazy. You'd hear about a kid, in Africa who is using the 1 hour of internet that they have per day to sell T-shirts to people in the United States, making six figures. I mean, it's incredible. That was the most powerful, incredible thing that we experienced with this whole print on demand space. The power of that has sort of driven my career and the rest of the market. That's the underlying powerful force behind what we're doing. But I think in right around 2015, we had a couple roadblocks that really kind of altered the
Is that the
path of
copycats was one of them?
so I'd say one of them was copycat.
And how did you deal with the copycats too for hopping into the others?
Yeah, yeah. It's tough, you know. I mean, we had some copycat platforms that were, I mean, using similar IP and things like that. But there was primarily the big problem was when a lot of you had all these Me Too sites and Me Too platforms that had various levels of quality. And so all of a sudden, Facebook was very sensitive about um, how many things are being sold in your news feed. Like how spammy does your news feed feel, like in terms of the ratio of organic content
What,
to
and they started
ads?
to cut into it, and so it wasn't as
Exactly.
easy to promote.
And then,
Got it.
and how happy are these people about these products, because all of a sudden, if you're sending, some heat transfer thing that washes off after one wash, or, they ordered this shirt and they received this shirt, or, Facebook tracks all that stuff and they understand, are people actually happy about this activity? And so um, there was a big crackdown on t-shirt ads and just, how many t-shirts could be advertised on the platform, what types of data variables you could use to target people on those ads. There was a while where people were targeting people's names and years they were born, and all of a sudden somebody said, wow, this feels a little bit like Big Brother. Facebook is trying to sell me a t-shirt that says, hey, your name is Alex and you were born in 1985. And it's like, wait a minute, what? Hey, that's a little bit too much. And, so that was kind of, I'd say the big sort of wrench number one was Facebook, just Facebook in general,
Sure. As
changing
it
their
evolved,
algorithms.
it wasn't as much of a gold rush. I mean, every kind
Exactly.
of new platform, I
Exactly.
mean, people getting into TikTok really pretty early have been able to monetize a lot better, and eventually it saturates out, and that the payouts aren't what they used to be. And
Right.
that happened. I mean, even with the I remember the organic posts and just sharing everything, like nothing
Yep.
reached anymore. And
Yep. Yeah.
now
You have
people
to.
are moving into like LinkedIn, for example, because they're trying to get people to do
Yeah.
more. But
So I think, at the time, Teespring was in a really unique position because we had crazy valuation, Silicon Valley VC money coming in,
wait,
very
so
well
when did you move
funded.
from East Coast to West Coast?
So, oh my gosh,
When the
it
Series
wasn't
A
a,
was, or
it wasn't a straight line. So we were our headquarters was in Providence, Rhode Island, and we were outsourcing everything at the time. I, initially we were growing so fast that there was not enough, first of all, we were doing everything with screen printing, everything was outsourced. And the way that we were interfacing with screen printers, like I would call a screen printer and I would say, hey, I can give you 200 jobs a day. On average, they're going to be about 50 pieces. So you're going to get some jobs that are, 200 plus pieces, not that many. And you're going to get some jobs that are like under 50 pieces, not that many, hopefully, right? And so already most screen printers want to hang up the phone because they're like, hey, I have a 200 piece minimum or I have a 140 piece minimum. As soon as you start to get under 100 pieces, especially back then, 2012, 2013, a lot of screen printers didn't want that type of work. So to have to do hundreds of jobs or 50 plus jobs that are all in that short run category, that's
Mhm.
already tough. But then we had the additional requirement of converting those batch orders into individual e-commerce orders. And so think about, even the most successful campaign, which would be a design going on a collection of
You had to
garments.
ship it all out to 50 people,
Bingo.
200 people,
Well,
which
or
today maybe people are a little bit more accustomed to. But yeah,
right.
I mean, you're talking 2000, what
Yep.
did you say, 15 or so,
Our,
14?
it's pretty much all one-offs. So even a 2,000 piece order, you're fulfilling over 1,900 individual orders. And we had some pretty slick, little ways for to do this manually without APIs and lots of software and technology. We had but it required a lot of training. It required a very lengthy onboarding process. There was lots of manual open loop communication that had to happen. And meanwhile, the company is growing 40% month over month. So literally, I think the first month, like we went from doing, a few thousand shirts a month to a million units a month in a year. I mean, it was
Wow.
crazy. And then having to because it wasn't traditional decorated apparel. If you're doing a million units a month in traditional decorated apparel, but you're doing 100,000 piece runs, well, there's tons of infrastructure that exists for doing that type of work. There's lots of
Sure.
shops that will take 100,000 piece runs and do lots of them and put them in boxes on pallets to go to stores. But we needed lots of capacity in individual fulfillment as well as batch, big batch jobs and individual fulfillment. So we kind of broke the we broke the screen printing contract layer very quickly. We
Sure.
also broke the garment distribution layer very quickly, because rather than bringing in lots of garments in a long retail cycle, we were needing to get garments very quickly, close to the customer, close to the decorator, and have them ready kind of just in time to produce with the order.
Do you remember?
So,
Do you remember a peak month as far as maybe
oh
garments
yeah,
coming in or dollars or something?
yeah, I think it was I and yeah. If anybody from Teespring is listening, they'll have to, maybe they can send me a correction on this. But I think it was either March or April of 2015, because there was this crazy, we just a straight line growth, and then the first sort of impediment to that was Facebook changing their algorithms. So there was this
Okay.
big algorithm change that caused, some platforms to lose all their volume, caused Teespring to lose quite a bit of revenue overnight, and
But do you,
it
do you
was
remember the number of shirts or orders
I
then?
think it was. I think it was like, yeah, it was like over a million shirts a month or something like that. It was a lot. It
Got
was
it. So it's
crazy,
just it's
crazy.
just insane. I mean, how did you solve working with distribution? Did you have to like go up to the mills to say
Yeah,
like we just have to
we
skip you guys and go?
so the problem, on one hand, so when you're that big, you're big enough to get the attention of all the mills and all the distributors. But the problem is, you need them to re-engineer every single thing about how they do things, right? Because for example, we learned the first year, um, I learned, I should say, I was the ops guy. I learned that the way that hoodies are made for printwear, so Gildan, Hanes, Fruit of the Loom, all of them, right? All the major printwear mills, they all make their fleece one time per year. And I think that year it was like April or something like that when they made all the fleece. And nobody really knew about Teespring was growing, but they weren't this big whale at the time like they were in peak season of that year, not even 6 months later. And so we were growing 40% month over month that year. Our customer base is growing exponentially. And by the time we got to October, really even by the time we got to August, September, we had started depleting certain colors of hoodies in the country. So like in the, 50/50 fleece, Gildan 18500, whatever, jerseys 996, Hanes P170, that basic fleece hoodie pullover, we had depleted the national supply in like yellow, purple, um, various different colors. Like the first colors were the ones that they don't make as big of batches for. But then by the time we got to like November, December, we had started depleting entire national stocks, distributor stocks of black hoodies and white hoodies and all kinds of stuff. So, and you realize that, when you're in the middle of peak season craziness, it's hard for, a platform like Teespring or this massive print on demand platform to just turn off, hey, we're not selling black hoodies right now, and everybody's like, well, wait, why? And it's
Sure.
because it's because the mills didn't produce enough in their one shot, and then the entire process of making garments takes like 8 months, so it's
So
not
how
calibrated to
how
the
do
on-demand
you
nature of what we're doing.
what are you just trying to aggressively call or source
So the
you know,
first
every
thing we had
possible solution or what?
the first thing we had to do was we had to empower the decorators to order. So that was the first big battle that I fought with the distributors, was getting sub accounts created for the printers for them to be able to order on our behalf and say, hey, here's my 200 jobs for the day, or my 50 jobs or whatever, and I'm going to use a sub account at the distributor to source all these things. And we had some at one point. Our largest screen print partner, which was this crazy unicorn company that was doing they were doing lots of short run. Some of these presses were doing like 5 setups an hour, like crazy unheard of stuff. They had a 10,000 square foot space just for receiving the blanks on demand. And we were basically just running, this particular decorator was in the DFW area, and we were running just full trucks from the distributor's warehouse in Dallas to the decorator, just constantly replenishing. And then we worked with the distributors and the mills to forecast things. And we started working. Peak season was really never. It was an ongoing project. I mean, we would start planning supply chains for peak season as early as January. And so that's all because you just never know with e-commerce and on demand, you never know what you're going to get. If you have some, influencer or celebrity or something that, needs a bunch of yellow hoodies, and they sell 30, 40,000, more than you thought, all of a sudden you're depleting, stocks. And so, but the challenge primarily at the time was, Facebook not having a decorator supply chain that's not used to doing on demand at all, having a garment printwear supply chain that's not used to it at all, and then also realizing naturally when we realized that Facebook was going to be a big risk, where do you go, right? Well, we're a VC funded company. We've got lots of connections. Let's go to traditional decorated apparel, right? And let's go talk to celebrities and brands and all of these other incredible sources of decorated apparel revenue, right? And because we were a sort of the belle of the ball of Silicon Valley custom apparel companies at the time, we were able to get connected to very large decorated apparel accounts and have very large decorated apparel opportunities come to us naturally. I was forced to start looking at direct to garment, even though everybody was telling me, hey, the quality's terrible. I mean, it was basically like a 4-letter word, for every, it was like, even with our board and exec team and everything, it was like, don't say DTG, don't even mention it. Like, DTG is not a solution. All of a sudden, this light bulb went off for me, being kind of a supply chain logistics warehouse process guy, right? And having spent the last 2 years in every type of screen printing operation that you could imagine, when I saw that and I saw, hey, they're printing just one of something and look at this process, for me, it was the biggest aha moment, because I wasn't married to the idea of screen printing, and I didn't understand all of the shortcomings of DTG. We were so desperate for a solution. We needed something like we were going to drown, And
Sure.
So when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, we're a software company. We can make this work. This is a printer. We can interface with it. We can feed it digital information. Like, this is the future. I then learned that, okay, so if we're going to get into DTG, well, who are the vendors, right? Okay, well, there's SSI. There's another vendor, the Dream Junction. So there was 2. The Dream Junction was in Southern California. SSI was in Iowa. But that was it. I mean, and we filled their capacity on like day 1.
I'm curious, did you, when you onboarded them and you've got a mix of screen and digital, how did that work, especially when you talk about the quality aspect? Like, did it matter? Like, for example, if I did a campaign and then I did a campaign, but it came out digital, especially then when you said it was a bit earlier,
Yep.
with the Avalanche and whatever Dream Junction was using.
Yep.
How was that managed, or did
It's a
it not
great
matter?
question.
You just
Yeah,
needed you
it's a
just need the
great
orders
question.
out.
Because so prior to direct to garment, um, if and mind you, we're still in the campaign model, so everything is a campaign. Everything, the experience of using Teespring is creating a design, setting a minimum, and the lowest minimum that you could set, I believe, was 12 units. That was the shortest run screen print job that we would farm out.
Mhm.
And as the platform grew, we kept seeing more and more volume in those lower buckets, and it was because we were getting exponentially more sellers, but the quality of those sellers was decreasing. So rather than getting these massive page owners and
Sure.
influencers and stuff, we're getting lots of people on average who are
For my
selling less.
picnic or for
Exactly.
barbecue, whatever.
Exactly. And so then we're seeing all of this traction in the 1 to 10, the 1 to 12, and so it's like, wow, well, if we could just unlock 1 to 12, then we could solve this problem. It was very frustrating for a seller to see 11 units, and in their mind, maybe that's $110, $100 to $200 in profit, and
And
then
it'd be gone.
and it's gone, right? Now, oh, we didn't get the 12th sale, so now we got to pull the rug out from
So
under you. So
that was where you could work with them. So it's
exactly.
interesting because it kind of paired together with the supply chain just not working for the growth, but also the types of orders that were coming in were perfectly fit. I mean, it's almost
Exactly.
like replaying in a way COVID with supply chain breaking, but also with so much e-commerce that's blown up too. So
The other thing we learned too, Bruce, was that there's a difference between uh, if somebody is just ordering one of something and they're getting it in a white poly mailer that they ordered from Facebook for like $14. There's a different expectation in quality. I'm not trying to justify this, but there's a different expectation in quality from that user than somebody going into the Nike store and seeing this incredible display with all these,
yeah,
30,
a
30 to
gag, a
$50
kind of
shirts.
gag, one shirt
Right,
versus uh,
right.
long term. Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, the sellers loved it because now they could capture all the revenue. The buyers didn't seem to care too much about the quality at the time, especially because we could ship it so quickly. So somebody could go from designing something on the internet to getting it a few days later. That was totally revolutionary, of just one of something, right? And so that's kind of how we dipped our toes in it. I quickly moved to opening a production facility. That was really right when we discovered DTG. We realized there wasn't enough capacity. We had this crazy growth trajectory. So we pivoted from, we still had kept an outsourced network. I believe Teespring still has an outsourced network. But I left Rhode Island to look at opening a production facility. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
brought me to kind of the greater Cincinnati area. We brought on a fulfillment executive from Amazon, Zappos, and he turned us on to this Hebron, Kentucky, Northern Kentucky area, which was really, really good for e-commerce fulfillment. So for e-commerce fulfillment, you're looking at I want a good location for shipping. I want a good location where I can ship to lots of population centers very efficiently with very low cost. And you want a business-friendly landscape, place where it's easy to recruit. And so Amazon kind of mastered this whole philosophy of where to put regional fulfillment centers, to make things as efficient as possible. So we wanted to take that approach. Let's open production facilities in this kind of regional
So
Amazon-like.
you started getting into internalizing it, but still
Exactly.
having this kind of contract partner network for the larger runs, opening
Yep.
up all these different facilities. I'm doing just some googling around. It's hard to see, and maybe you can't say, but what revenue was roughly around then. But I see anywhere numbers of 50, 60, 70
Yeah. I
million or
mean,
so.
at one point, I can't remember what it was at the time. There's public information about what it was kind of at its peak. Um, what happened though was from 2015 to 2017, the Facebook situation only got worse and worse in terms of just how strict they were getting about custom products and POD platforms. So, we pivoted into more retail kind of influencer stuff. I remember getting an NFL deal, getting an NBA, getting Elton John, getting Beyonce, getting so excited. We had the wind in our sail from Silicon Valley. I thought we were going to go take over the world. I mean, I literally thought we're in the space age over here, screen printing's over here in the Stone Age, and we're going to go take over everything. Well, sure enough, that market is so different. The traditional decorated, and this was the big lesson that I learned, was the traditional decorated apparel market, the traditional retail, promo, screen printing, embroidery, is the output expectations and the kind of tools that you need in your toolkit to properly service that market is so different than what we had in digital at the time. So we had these machines, that could produce fairly accurate color. Depending on the color, it would be more accurate than other colors,
but not
right?
to large retail, Nike.
Exactly. So you couldn't take, the reality of the output at the time was, a shirt that smells like vinegar in a poly mailer, in an unbranded poly mailer with no branding in the neck, that scratches off and washes off. It washes off after a couple washes. I mean, that is the reality of the situation. There has never been a direct-to-garment technology, especially at that time, that was anywhere close to the color accuracy capability or the print durability capability, or just having dynamic hand feels and things like that you could achieve with screen printing.
You keep saying you say at the time, so I'm assuming Printforia has got some interesting things that they've been working on internally.
Yeah. Of course, there's a sales pitch attached to that. So,
TeeSpring, was this all? What happened? With all of that now, because granted, from what I see is that there's definitely been a huge rise of the company as well, which I'm assuming is after you left, and they've really tapped into influencers again, and YouTube has been huge, and influencers move big units from the things that I've seen at companies like FanJoy and some of these others.
Totally, yeah. So I have to say, TeeSpring is doing phenomenal right now. The new CEO, Chris LaMontagne, helped the company really pivot. It's a totally different company now. So I definitely want to preface that. TeeSpring is doing great. We still know a lot of people there. They're doing very exciting things. I'm talking specifically about 2015 to 2017. And some of the challenges that we experienced that sort of opened my eyes to what was missing. And so at the time, we were trying to produce.
By the way, the reason I ask too is because there's so many rumors of things that I've heard, and these all get passed down of it was too fast, or it was in-house, didn't know what happened, it was too expensive, whatever. A lot of things slowed down. So that's why I'm curious to know, from somebody who was in there.
Essentially it's a microcosm of the current problem, which is trying to convert traditional decorated apparel over to this on-demand, lean, digital to physical process in an e-commerce fulfillment model. So that's really... and at the time, we were trying to take, very, very high, premium, high-end quality expectation work and reproduce that on printers that had, very limited color gamut. We're not able to print on most, a lot of different substrata, like they can't print on 100% polyester, even some polyester could produce very inconsistent results and things like that. So that was the real challenge, was just kind of, I was seeing a huge gap in terms of what the manufacturing technology was capable of like the ceiling of that manufacturing technology and what the requirements were from these big retail decorated apparel partnerships. And the other big problem was that the printer companies at the time, and to some extent still to this day, were not being honest about how much they were missing. So like if you look at Kornit, for example, Kornit will tell you you have everything you need for your decorated apparel business in this box. It's a box with 2 pallets and a spray system and some white ink and some CMYK ink, or maybe you have a true red, maybe you have a hexa configuration if you have an Atlas or an HD6 or something like that. But basically, with these print heads and this spray system and fixation, you're good to go. You can go do most decorated apparel applications. Mm-hmm. And when you get into it, you realize, well, actually that's not really the case. This isn't really good enough for Bravado or UMG or Nike or any of the big sports brands. And a lot of the answers that I would get at the time was stuff like oh no, you just your customers don't actually need that quality. No, you don't actually need to be that high quality, or or like these are
the manufacturers that say this?
Yeah, like a lot of the DTG printer manufacturers. So Kornit's pretty notorious for saying stuff like that. And you're looking at some of these. Take Nike for example, right? Nike's on the extreme side of quality. So for Nike, for the basic level of quality for a Nike shirt, let's call it a whatever Kentucky basketball 1-color white ink shirt on a blue, on a royal blue blank, right? They want you to withstand 25 washes at 60 Celsius with not a single crack in the print, right? So literally like the shirt's about to melt before the print, right? And then you compare that to, any sort of direct-to-garment print, especially Kornit print, you can scratch it off, so you can't even put it through one cycle at 60 Celsius is going to erode half the print, so it's not even, they weren't even in the same universe, Now, obviously, Nike's an extreme example, right? But
it holds the market. It because when somebody orders baseball tees, they want the quality that they go get at the store, right? Not something else. And granted, of course, I'd like to make a huge star here because I don't get any funky emails from we're talking about 2015 and 2017.
Right.
So
a lot's changed.
And Alex, by the way, is running a large digital DTG company. So, but I mean, I think you bring up a good point, and especially converts to today, though, too, which is I want to get into with you, especially the balance of where you think things play. But so was it like a combination then of these aspects that really did it slow the growth, or did it say to the company, hey, we just have to change we're running in this circle, but now we got to kind of go elsewhere, or what?
What I felt like? I felt like we had built the coolest Formula One race car that was about to go win, whatever Grand Prix, and we forgot the engine. That's kind of how I felt. It's like, hey, we got everything ready. We're ready for the race. We're ready for the party, and then we realized that it didn't have the maybe not no engine, but it didn't have the right type of engine to even participate in the race, right? And so that feeling sort of pushed me to the manufacturing technology side. I started looking at the big difference between what screen printing is really good at and what direct-to-garment is really good at is color accuracy, print durability, large blocks of spot colors. So, if you want to see all the shortcomings of DTG, go take a 12-inch by 12-inch box of white, just L value 100, and then print it through the printer and see what happens. You'll see all all the little missing nozzles and everything, right? Because you're raining little drops on top of peaks and valleys of a shirt that's, it's an inkjet print head that's designed for paper, and you're printing on this thing that's, some chemical soup of fibers and peaks and valleys. And so so that's kind of the main difference. Is like the holy grail for direct to garment has always been, at least for me, trying to match screen printing's color gamut, the print durability, and the vibrancy and consistency of solid blocks of color. When I started seeing what people were doing with the wet to dry process and then kind of MacGyvering in these other steps, like I would see somebody post on the DTG, hobby forum, post like a white ink print, and I'd say, whoa, that looks like a screen print. Wow, how did you do that? And they'd say, I pre-treated, then I dried, then I heat pressed, then I printed white, then I dried it, then I heat pressed again, then I printed another layer of white, then I dried it, then I heat pressed. I'm thinking, wait a minute. So 30 minutes later and, $8 worth of ink later, you've got a shirt. However, what was interesting was that they were using process and additional steps to get higher quality. Well, what is that similar to? Similar to screen printing. That's how screen printers think. That's how screen printing works is, in any artwork garment scenario, you're looking at it. This is one of the things that's so impressive to me about screen printers, particularly people that understand pre-press, is like somebody that is really good at pre-press can look at any artwork garment scenario and they can say like, oh yeah, we're gonna do a 110 mesh on this, and this is gonna be a 230 mesh over here, and they wanted this Pantone, but I know it's this true red, and just all this like tribal knowledge that's like so accessible at any given time, and they understand how to build layers in the right way on a carousel, and that's really critical. A screen printer that does a lot of retail work, especially a lot of very technical, premium, high fashion work, they're going to understand the micro differences between different types of heat presses or hot rollers or hot irons that give you different hand feels, that's all the way down to how does it feel? How does the print need to feel on this specific shirt? Just a totally different level of quality control and variables that you have to keep in mind. And so that's what I really liked about what some of these little mom and pop shops, and what a lot of people thought would be crazy, I thought was really cool, because it was kind of R&D for, well, if we could just think outside the box and have a perfect direct to garment process, what would that process look like?
With what you were pulling together there, and then what you were doing then at now Printforia, which we got to kind of get into what is Printforia. Yeah. But I'm very curious as to the comparisons with 2020, with the pandemic and everything, and with the explosion of e-commerce with garments and your knowledge of all that and what's happened, especially, equipment manufacturers who manufacture digital want to say digital's gonna be the majority of the market. Obviously, screen printers, I want to say we, because we're over here saying this is interesting. I mean, I do a little bit of it. I'm not like super thrilled. It has its place, but if it takes over, cool. And so, but it's interesting thinking about the market. I mean, we just did a really great podcast with Rafael Perez, who's like big on the international retail side, and again, it is quality is driven up here at a level that they need, and so they keep going to screen. Now, do they love digital for aspects? For sure, because it could be sampling thing. They do a lot of really cool small run personalization stuff, and it more so is a play nice together aspect. But I think just when I'm listening to your story of going back to the supply chain breaking is stuff that we're still experiencing here today.
Well, it's things that we experienced in our little niche on-demand world.
Yeah, it was like a microcosm
7 or 8 years ago that everybody's experiencing on a global stage right now.
Right.
So just to kind of, to blow through the OvalJet story, it's a big story, and there's a whole separate podcast that we could do just on that. But from 2017 to 2020, I was involved in product development on OvalJet, the world's fastest direct-to-garment platform. And we developed what's very interesting about the approach that we took was we were users of the technology. Okay, we were not machine builders or people starting a machine company to sell machines. We wanted a machine that we could use that was a better mousetrap for getting decorated apparel business into digital on demand. And so that's important caveat number one. Number two, we went into a very non-traditional development cycle for this type of product. We really used kind of software development methodology, agile methodology to develop this product in a very iterative process over the course of 3 years. And we did it with a couple partners on the decorated apparel side that were putting live orders through these machines. So, through the course of the 3 years, rather than designing the machine in a lab and then kind of forcing it on the market, we designed it in production with the market, and we put over 4 million prints through these systems, including prints from some very large companies that really don't do any DTG. So that was this kind of R&D project that we did on how do we close the gap between screen printing and DTG. And so fast forward to end of 2019. OvalJet is released to the market. I had been in this sort of rabbit hole echo chamber of the e-commerce world and e-commerce fulfillment world and trying to make the most sophisticated direct-to-garment machine that we had ever seen. And when we deployed this technology to the market, I think I realized that I was in a bit of an echo chamber and maybe had been pulled down a 7-year rabbit hole, because when I came back to the market, the majority of the market was still the same. Now, this is pre-COVID. This is right before COVID. Mm-hmm. And I just couldn't believe it, how, the number of companies that was doing like API integrated, digital to physical printing, whether that's through direct-to-garment or through dye sublimation or heat transfer or whatever, had not evolved. I mean, things had not evolved much in kind of the 7 years that I had been down this journey. So fast forward to 2020, right? I met at the end of 2019, we had released this product. I was seeing more kind of more willingness from the retail space to look at direct to garment as a viable option. Everybody saw that e-commerce was getting, bigger and bigger, not anywhere to the extent that COVID took it. Right. But so the landscape was great for starting a company that was going to be, using this technology to serve retail companies and brands. And so that's when I met David McCaleb and David McClure from Printforia. So I had been in kind of this like crazy R&D project with direct to garment, kind of almost like exploring the future of what's possible in direct to garment. These guys were doing the same thing on the Amazon side with e-commerce fulfillment. So they came from, they were running the Amazon Fresh, Prime Now, Prime Pantry business for on the ops side for Amazon. David McCaleb was on the engineering side and David McClure was on the ops side. And together, they were launching, I think they launched a huge chunk of the Amazon Fresh sites globally. And that's where a lot of the automation technologies were being leveraged, the computer vision systems, Kiva robot, all this stuff that, I know a little bit about e-commerce fulfillment, but like that stuff to me was
it's another scale.
Next level, right? And so they kind of came from the future of e-commerce fulfillment. I kind of came from the future of DTG. They wanted to start a company that really was around this concept of value-added fulfillment, which is sort of a bigger umbrella concept of which print on demand is part of. So print on demand is, taking blank things or, blank products and decorating them with ink, Well, value-added fulfillment is just doing things in the process of something being an order being fulfilled. So
Mhm.
they launched they wanted to start a kind of contract printing company on the surface, but really what Printforia is doing is building the global execution layer for what we call supply chain zero. It's a zero waste supply chain that focuses on leveraging value-added fulfillment technologies to do as many things on demand in the fulfillment process. So how much of the manufacturing process can we do on demand? So it's a big idea.
Got it.
It's a big
I was just about to
concept.
say, what the
Yeah.
does that mean? But no, but that makes sense as far as, again, it's very just in time, right? Is
Right.
in the supply chain books.
Yeah.
How does that? So contracts. It's clear there's like products that you guys are working on, or like some really cool stuff there. But like, what is the how does this, like, what happened then? We've got $45 billion market. You said 2% or so DTG. It seems like that 2
Yep.
to 3x or so during COVID. Where does this go? And then what did you guys see from the supply chain happening over the last 12 months
Yeah.
that really changed?
Yeah. So, obviously COVID changed everything. The big, you know, nobody knew what was going to happen when COVID hit. I mean, there was the first month, people were either completely shut down or trying to convert to make PPE. And we were part of that. We were making PPE. Our future was incredibly uncertain. And then it was around June, early summer of
Mm-hmm.
2020. All of a sudden, it went from being this silence to everything around e-commerce and everything related to e-commerce exploded. And it was almost like, it was very odd for our industry. Our industry would, the print on demand direct to garment industry typically follows similar peaks and valleys that the screen printing industry does. So for example, June is typically a very slow month. The summertime's typically slower. You'll get a back to school push, and then, that'll kind of ramp up into peak season. But the summer is typically slow. So, when you have a global pandemic and everything shuts down, you're kind of thinking, oh my gosh, are we going to shut down for the summer? What's going to happen? It's already slow in the summer. Now we've got a global pandemic. What happened was the demand just bounced back, and all the demand that was going to go into these long run big batches of custom products overseas came back into the United States in the form of on demand or just in time decorated apparel orders that were being sold on e-commerce platforms. So
Got it.
all of a sudden, so there was this crazy, and you can look at the data on this. The countries that were affected the hardest economically by COVID were primarily in Central America and Southeast Asia, regions of the world that are mass producing products for Europe and the United States.
Got it.
And the way that these retailers typically operate with these factories is having them make lots, big batches of products that they may or may not pick up, several months later. And COVID hit right at the weakest point in the retail cycle, or the riskiest point in the retail cycle, where all these factories had all these goods ready to pick up. So for all the big brands and big retail brands, if I'm one of their suppliers in some country, I might have millions of dollars of product ready to pick up. Company didn't pick up, and that happened across the board with coronavirus. So all these big retail orders that were ready for to be picked
Yeah, it
up
says
and
we're
handed
good.
off in chain of custody. Yeah, we're good. And so
Yeah,
that was
which happened to so
replaced.
many shops too. Is hey,
Exactly.
these garments.
And
Sorry,
so exactly. So what did the retailers do? They put it all online, right? And so when you put it online, how do you support that, right? So already that alone increased the demand for domestic decoration activity and also domestic distribution activity. So rather than storing containers of this product overseas and then taking 8 months, to kind of arbitrage it around the globe, finally ending in a bunch of stores in the United States before Christmas. Well, now companies can just basically use any of their e-commerce platforms as kind of a testing ground. So I don't have to go and pre-produce 250,000 of these things if I can put them online.
We kind of, it's almost like a pre-order.
Exactly.
Gauge demand, keep inventory, which I've, actually going to do a lot of working with shops and doing shop tours and everything. I see quite a bit of brands that they will keep blanks on hand at the shops.
Yep.
It's not because they're going to run it. It's because when we want to do something with this, it's there and we can turn around a lot quicker.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I think is happening, and I think I've told you this analogy, Bruce. I hope I don't offend anybody with this analogy. It's not the most politically
honest.
Correct. But this is my 3-layered cake analogy. So what I think happened with COVID was, I think COVID created, so the way I see the market, you've got on the bottom the supply layer. And in that supply layer, you have companies like Printforia, which are API integrated digital to physical, or API integrated direct to garment fulfillment companies that can take, that we have an API, we can take any type of digital order and produce it on demand. The number of companies like that, you can count on one hand in the United States, right? So including companies that do direct to garment, dye sublimation, any sort of person that says, hey, I have an API that you can integrate to, send digital orders into. They're almost non-existent. There's only a tiny amount of them. So COVID turned the entire supply layer into headless chickens. This is why, hopefully I don't offend anybody with this analogy, but it's really, illustrates what I think we saw. So supply layer, right? You go from having maybe 2% of this layer are companies like Printforia, companies that can support this type of new e-commerce driven on-demand, decorated apparel. The other 98%, well, they're headless chickens because they're not getting orders from the same sources. Nothing works the same way that it used to. I can't get blanks because they're in various different stages. Everything's a mess, right? Nothing worked the way that it's supposed to work. So that's why we have this supply layer of headless chickens. Well, the top of this cake is the retailers and brands that service customers directly. So any company, whether you're Nike or Adidas or Under Armour, whether you're a brand, right? Like if I'm buying a Nike shirt as a customer, I'm associating everything with Nike. Or if I buy a shirt from J. Crew, a retail brand, I'm associating that quality with J. Crew, right? So that's how I would categorize the top layer. Also headless chickens, right? Because all of a sudden,
what do I do with the stores? What do I do?
What do I do with all this product?
Yeah.
How do I
know
fulfill
what
the
stores?
Sales?
Yeah,
exactly. And so you could see this all playing out in a very spectacular, extraordinary way in the beginning of COVID, where you had factories shutting down, you had small little DTG shops that have 6 months of a backlog because there's way too much demand for them to know what to do with. You've got, domestic screen printers and screen print shops trying to convert over to make PPE or trying to figure out how to participate in e-commerce somehow. But the big disruptor was e-commerce. The big disruptor, and to quantify it, I don't have the exact current data, but the last time I looked at it, we went from e-commerce being 14% of retail, which actually that amazes me as somebody that uses Amazon Prime all the time. So low, Actually, you think
I actually saw that same stat. It was like U.S. Department of there's like some U.S. Department of something that reports that out. But I was very surprised too. But that's what. But what's very interesting, and yes, right, because it went up, but I didn't see ever the updated. Where are we settled at now, or when was the last time
The
you saw it?
last, the last I looked, where we were at 33% of retail, so which was about 10 years of e-commerce evolution that happened in 3 months. And
Hmm.
that's incredible because at the previous rate of evolution, we were already breaking everything every year. So every single year you read about, oh, UPS is broken and DHL is broken, and we broke all the carriers again because of the, the 0.5% increase in e-com. And
Sure.
so you had even my wife's from Colombia, and I think in Colombia e-commerce was 4% of retail before, and now all of my in-laws are all ordering everything on these on apps, right? In South America, it's Rappi. Here, it's Postmates and DoorDash, and everybody knows how to buy stuff online now. And so it takes there's statistics about, like, it takes 5 weeks to form a habit, right? So everybody was quarantined for well over 5 weeks, ordering things on their phone, getting things shipped online. So we've created a new uh, standard for consuming things, a new standard for ordering things, and it's never going back, right? So, but what I believe is that this has created the single largest opportunity in decorated apparel ever that we've ever seen, because for the first time we're now uh, you know this this old school way of arbitraging things around the globe to kind of exploit at each step and shave pennies off at each step of the process, that's obsolete now, right? So
Sure.
we need to do things more efficiently. We need raw materials to be closer to the customer. We need manufacturing to be closer to the customer. Everything has to happen more efficiently because of e-commerce. And I think there's a very, very large misconception around direct to garment and screen printing and embroidery, and which ones are for e-commerce and which ones are not. They're all for e-commerce. You can use every single one of those decorating techniques in an e-commerce
It's just
fulfillment
different.
application.
It's different tools. You got me interested looking around
Exactly.
at the data to try to get the
Yeah.
average, because I remember it peaked pretty high and then it kind of slowed, but it looks like it averaged around 14 to 15% for the year, which is higher than, I guess, 12% or 11% previously, but it definitely accelerated it. Now there are some different data sources here that's all around, but regardless, it is a significant shift, and as you say, it is. And I think from a very small shop to even a large shop, like, it's a huge sales tool. I mean, that
Oh,
we
totally.
built our platform merch on this too, is just to help use e-commerce as a big sales tool for not just for a picnic up into, I keep saying going to a picnic. We need to do a little,
Like a
maybe I should
family
create.
reunion or
Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it is interesting. So, like, is it, from your perspective, it's just more of a balance of still the different types of orders, or does Printforia or other digital manufacturers really, is it a dollars investment thing until they can get the quality up and the speed up? Or, as you mentioned, is it just chemistry? Like, if we're doing wet on wet, this is just as fast as it can go. And the
Yeah.
other thing that I think that's interesting too is, there, we were talking internally the other day, is you've got 3D printing, right? Cool
Hmm.
technology. You can create quick products, right? Like this case, very quickly,
Yep.
as a prototype. But now we need to make about 5 million of these cases over the next couple of years here.
Right.
Well, let's go back. Let's make the die. Let's get this, let's set it all up. Sure, it's more expensive. It's more time consuming, but we gotta pump numbers here. Is that sort of what this is like? Or, and
Yeah.
because I
So
think you got me going on this too, because I I also see a huge investment, more so from heavily out west as well, getting into apparel, saying, "Whoa, like, what is this? What's going on? Amazon's doing this," and so on.
yeah. So going back to your example of a headphones case,
Mm-hmm.
bringing it back to like a decorated apparel example, the way you can think about this is, so well, first of all, there's a couple requirements, right? So you have to have like the requirement for me as a direct to garment producer, I have to be able to match the output that's expected with screen print. So that's, even just that has been a challenge, right? And that's kind of the little elephant in the room about direct to garment, is that, you know, if you are trying to get retail ready quality, it's almost impossible. You know, you're going to get a print that has, now we have since, you know, through our work with Ovaljet, through all of the additional work that we've done at Printforia, we actually can show objectively that our quality can match screen printing, and we can show objectively to, you know, the retailers and the brands that need this type of compliance, that we can comply. So that is, you know, you have to be able to produce the output that's required by the retail industry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, screen printers and embroidery shops don't have to worry about that. They already have the output that's expected by the retail industry. The other big problem is that, and this goes back to the headless chickens on the retail side, is, you know, let's say I get a call tomorrow from some massive retail brand that's just laid off their entire merchandising team, right? They just laid off like all their buyers, planners, you know, people that deal with all the factories, right? And they say, hey, Alex, we're finally ready to put everything online. We're finally ready to go all on demand tomorrow. I'd say, okay, well, first of all, you know, I don't know if I have the capacity for you, number one. Second of all, do you speak my language? Well, what do you mean by that? You know, say, well, how are you going to do business with me? How are you going to send me orders? Because I don't have a customer service department. I don't have an order taking department. I don't have a pre-press department. I have an API that is a digital pipeline that you need a software engineer that speaks API language to integrate to, right? Do you have one of those? No, is the answer to that question most of the time, or it's a new thing for them. So even just being able to speak the language of being able to do on-demand and things through an API is going to take quite some time. Also, it's going to take a long time for the direct-to-garment contract printing market to get to the quality level of where retail needs to be, right? So we already know that most of the quality out there in DTG is not good enough for most retail applications. We also know that there's not enough capacity on the supply chain, and also that extends into the raw materials as well. So like if Disney overnight was to say, hey, we're gonna get rid of screen printing and put all of our t-shirts, use DTG to produce all of our t-shirts, there's not enough printers, there's not enough ink, there's not enough pigment that's milled. You know, there's not enough nano-milled titanium dioxide to make the white ink to do that tomorrow. So it's going to require a long time to build out this new execution layer that's dynamic and can take different types of decorated apparel requirements and kind of match them to different decorating techniques. And so going back to your example with this 3D printed thing, well, let's take let's go back to Baby Yoda, right? I love Baby Yoda. I think his name is actually Grogu, because I did actually watch the series and it was awesome. But I
tried, because everybody kept talking about it, and I was like, let me try this out here. But you know, that's the problem with, I think that one I had to pay attention to that show where I was just trying to work and watch. And anyway,
I always bring it up because if you're in the t-shirt world, if you've been involved in decorated apparel for the last 5 or plus years, as soon as that cartoon came out, it was like Baby Yoda, like everywhere, right? It was the biggest merch opportunity for a character in a very long time. So anyways, going back to the Baby Yoda example, if I'm Disney, I'm not necessarily in the business of printing shirts or making shirts or doing tech packs or pre-press work or any of that. I might have a merchandising team or an outsourced function that does that type of work, but it's all bottlenecked by very long lead times, huge batch requirements. So maybe on the super popular Baby Yoda design, I'm gonna have 500,000 printed in Asia, 500,000 printed in Central America under normal circumstances. Well, now I'm not going to do that because I don't know what stores are going to be open in Christmas. I don't know where the customers are going to be. I don't know what the whole market, all the data that I have is now bad, right? So what I can do now is now I can take those designs, put them on all the .coms, plus I could take thousands and thousands of other designs. If I'm Disney and I have the option to put up 1,000 different Baby Yoda designs on all these different e-com platforms that might have different designs regionally, you might have that you get to be a lot more experimental with designs. You probably have certain designs that might sell way more in certain regions if you can add regional elements to it
at scale.
Exactly, but that activity does not have to be pigeonholed into one production technique. If I'm Disney, I can take all my 1 to 10 piece orders, anything that I just sold 1 to 10 of, direct to garment. Anything that I sold, this many to this many, well, now I've got it on a just-in-time model in short-run screen printing. And what we're seeing in the United States right now is unprecedented demand because of that shift. There's a network effect of way more demand for decorating domestically close to the customer because we're not doing as much of it overseas and bringing it in. The same thing's happening with garments. If you look at the chaos that's happening in the printwear supply chain with garments, it's all related to the fact that typically a company like Gildan, right, that's making who knows how many hundreds of millions of units per year for printwear, right? A lot of their activity is going to be producing container quantities of product and then ocean freighting those containers over to other producing countries like Bangladesh or China or wherever to be printed on and then distributed all over the United States and Europe and Asia. But now, they might, like, all of that can basically be all of those garments, instead of going to those massive factories overseas to be produced in 500,000 piece runs, they all need to come back into the United States, into the distribution layer, and into screen printing shops, into embroidery shops, into the distributors. And so you can just see in the demand and everything that's happening right now that the total demand for decorating has actually increased significantly in the United States. It's just the source of that revenue is from e-com platforms primarily. So that's where I think everything is headed. I think everything is, there is not one technology to rule them all. Every market's different. Every customer is different. Every customer has a different expectation of what their product should be. And I don't think that, we should be thinking about this as a DTG eating screen printing or whatever eating DTG or anything like that. It's e-commerce eating traditional retail. That's what's happening, and it's created, I believe, exponentially more opportunities for everybody than existed potentially.
Couldn't
prior.
agree more.
Yeah,
couldn't agree more. This is such an awesome episode. I think probably our longest.
Sorry.
I'm curious. No, I find it very interesting. I'm curious from you guys out there listening. Just leave us a comment or shoot me an email, bruce@printavo.com. I love to hear just how to make our show even better for you guys, what you guys want to hear too. So love to hear your feedback. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Alex. This is Alex Phelan out of Printforia. They've got some really cool announcements coming out soon, so I'll just leave it up to that, and you guys can be able to follow in on them. There's not a lot out there yet, but I feel like there'll be some stuff coming soon.
Yeah, I mean, so just a quick pitch about Printforia. We're a contract direct to garment printer that is focused on building the execution layer that we believe retail and brands need. So we are hyper focused on premium quality, matching the screen print quality expectation in an on-demand fashion, creating the retail, creating a retail-ready experience around, how products are shipped, how products are received. We currently have, one contract printing facility up here in Vancouver, Washington. But the model, the sort of model that we're going after is a regional fulfillment model. So we are open for business. We don't have we're not easy to do business with because we just have an API, and you have to integrate with us to use us. But we're essentially trying to close the gap on quality between print on demand and retail, and we're also going to be public. We've already published, and we're going to be keep publishing some materials about just the objective difference in our quality. So I'll share those with you, Bruce. I think it'd be really interesting for you
we'll
to share
definitely
with
link it below, especially for the guys that are really into this. I think it'd be very interesting to see, especially some of the work that they're doing there. So Printforia, you guys can see it, or just connect with Alex on LinkedIn. You're super. It's Phelan, not what it sounds like. Phelan.
Yeah, Phelan. And I love talking shop. I mean, I'm like, as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, feel free to reach out anytime. I love talking about this stuff.
Alex, thanks for joining us. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you guys on the next Printavo Print Hustlers podcast in a week.